In the dead of night, when most of the world sleeps, a deadly act unfolds inside the confines of a maximum security prison. A place where the unthinkable becomes reality. A man, already serving multiple life sentences for the brutal murder of 4 people, stands accused once again, this time of murdering his own wife. And the chilling part? This act of violence occurred during a conjugal visit, an event meant to provide a rare moment of privacy, but instead turned into a tragedy that would shock everyone. David Brinson, once a man known for a brutal past, is accused of committing yet another unforgivable crime. But this time, it wasn't in the streets of Los Angeles where his violent spree began. It was inside a California prison, where he was granted a seemingly harmless privilege, a conjugal visit, a moment meant to provide inmates with a touch of human connection, but one that would end in horror. David Brinson, a convicted mass murderer, now stands accused of taking the life of someone he once claimed to love, his wife, Stephanie Dowles. The shocking act of strangulation raises more than just questions about his actions. It forces us to examine the prison system itself. How could this happen behind prison walls, with its strict security measures? How could a man who once killed in cold blood, and who is serving a life sentence, still be allowed to have such privileges? And was this death the result of a plan, or was it a tragic accident? The twists and turns of this tragic event will leave you questioning prison policies, justice, and the truth behind those who walk through these prison gates. Join us as we uncover the shocking details of a murder that took place where it was least expected. The murder of a wife at the hands of a man who should have never had the opportunity. The night of November 13, 2024, started like any other at Mule Creek State Prison. Inmates were settled in their cells, the cold metallic walls standing as silent sentinels against the night's stillness. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the occasional clink of metal echoed from the distant corridors. For most, the night would pass uneventfully, but for David Brinson, this night would mark the beginning of another dark chapter in his life. At exactly 2 a.m., a call for help echoed through the prison's corridors, a distressing cry that would disrupt the monotony of the night. David Brinson, isolated in his family unit during a conjugal visit with his wife, Stephanie Dowles, dialed the emergency phone, reporting that his wife had suddenly passed out. His voice, filled with urgency, carried through the receiver, but little did anyone know that this call would be the beginning of a devastating and tragic chain of events. Within minutes, prison staff arrived at the family unit, hoping to find the cause of Stephanie's sudden collapse. They found her unresponsive, lying on the floor, with Brinsen standing nearby, desperately calling for assistance. The officers immediately began performing CPR, working tirelessly to revive her. The prison's emergency medical team was dispatched, and the entire unit was placed on high alert. Despite their best efforts, the reality began to set in. At 2:51 a.m., just under an hour after Brinson's call, Stephanie Dowles was officially pronounced dead. The room fell silent as the weight of the tragedy began to sink in. In the beginning, authorities were unsure of what had happened. Could this have been a natural event, perhaps a heart attack, or a medical emergency? Given Stephanie's age and the stress of the prison environment, the initial assumption was that this might have been the cause. But as the days passed, the investigation began to take a dark turn. What seemed like a tragic, unexpected event soon revealed something far more sinister. The Amador County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy, and the results were chilling. The cause of death was not a heart attack, not a medical issue. Stephanie had been strangled. The truth was inescapable. Stephanie Dowles had not died from natural causes. She had been deliberately strangled. The implications were immediate, and the question loomed large. Was this a tragic accident, an unforeseen event during a seemingly intimate visit? Or was this the deliberate act of a man with a history of violence, someone capable of cold, calculated brutality, even in the confines of a prison? With this revelation, the investigation took on a new urgency. Stephanie's family was left in disbelief, grappling with the horror of knowing that someone she loved and trusted, her own husband, was the prime suspect in her untimely death. For David Brinson, already a convicted killer, the darkness of his past was beginning to resurface, and the haunting question remained: was this his fifth murder? And if so, how had it happened behind the high walls of a prison designed to prevent such violence? Now, many might ask, how does a man like David Brinson, whose violent history includes the brutal murder of 4 people, still get to enjoy the privilege of family visits? It's a question that seems to defy logic. After all, conjugal visits are typically seen as a right reserved for inmates who have earned trust and maintained good behavior. Yet, Brinson was allowed this rare and controversial privilege. How could someone like him be granted access to private, intimate time with his wife? In California, the policy is rooted in the belief that maintaining familial bonds can be instrumental in an inmate's rehabilitation. It's grounded in the notion that personal connections, especially with spouses, can play a significant role in a prisoner's emotional and psychological healing. But here's the catch. Not just any inmate can get conjugal visits. Only those who meet specific criteria are granted this rare privilege. Inmates must demonstrate sustained good behavior, comply with all program requirements, and remain free from disciplinary issues. At first glance, this might seem like a fair system, one that rewards inmates who are attempting to better themselves. But there's a deeper issue at play, especially when it comes to violent offenders. Inmates like Brinson, who are convicted of multiple murders, are not explicitly excluded from these visits. And that's where the system begins to raise more troubling questions. These visits, designed to foster family connections and support rehabilitation, are also highly controversial. For some, the notion that an inmate with a violent history can enjoy such a privilege seems inherently flawed. How can someone like Brinson, who has already shown an utter disregard for human life, be trusted with time alone with a loved one? And if he is granted this privilege, what safeguards are in place to ensure that these visits don't turn into an opportunity for something much more sinister? The security during these visits raises further concerns. While there are checks and balances in place, guards monitoring and unannounced checks throughout the visit, the question remains: how secure are these visits really? Is the privacy allowed during these conjugal visits truly a measure of rehabilitation, or a dangerous loophole that allows inmates with violent tendencies to continue their unchecked behavior? For inmates like Brinson, these visits can become more than just a moment of family connection. They can become an opportunity, a moment of time alone, away from the scrutiny of guards, to manipulate or control. And in the case of Stephanie Dowles, what was meant to be a rare, private moment between husband and wife became the backdrop for a tragedy. To understand the gravity of the current case, we must first look back, way back, to a brutal crime that shocked not just Los Angeles, but the entire nation. It was 1990, and David Brinson was just 23 years old, a young man at the crossroads of life, yet already tangled in the web of crime. But what he did on one fateful night would mark him forever as one of the most cold-hearted killers in the city's history. It all started when Brinson targeted the home of Robert Marks, a man he believed to be deeply involved in the cocaine trade, a high-level dealer who could provide the wealth and power Brinson desperately craved. Driven by greed and the need to settle what he perceived as a wrong, Brinson entered Mark's home under the cover of darkness. What was supposed to be a robbery turned into a bloodbath that would forever stain the city's history. Armed with a gun, Brinson quickly gained control of the situation. Desperate, frantic, and blinded by anger, he forced Marks and three other men, 28-year-old G. McCullers, 33-year-old Saladino Elias, and 27-year-old William Terry, to the ground. What happened next was chilling in its precision, coldness, and brutality. In an execution-style killing, Brinson showed no remorse. He shot each of the men in the back of their heads, one by one. The violence was so swift, so deliberate, that the victims had no chance to defend themselves. 4 innocent lives, taken in an instant. Left behind was nothing but a pool of blood, staining the floor, and the lives of those who loved the victims. Brinson's crime was not just senseless. It was a massacre. The bloodshed left the community stunned, and the city of Los Angeles reeling from the brutality of the killings. How could someone commit such an act of violence so casually, without hesitation? The answer would soon come to light. A man desperate, impulsive, and willing to do anything to secure his own twisted form of success. It didn't take long for the police to track down Brinson. His involvement in the murders was clear, and the overwhelming evidence stacked against him sealed his fate. Stephanie Dowles, known to her friends and family as Stevie, was a woman who touched the lives of everyone around her. At 62 years old, Stephanie was the embodiment of kindness, warmth, and unwavering devotion. She was a beloved mother, grandmother, and small business owner, a woman whose life was spent serving others. A skilled hairdresser by trade, Stephanie owned and operated her own salon. Her clients weren't just customers, they were friends. She took pride in making them feel not just beautiful, but truly seen. Stephanie wasn't just a business owner. She was a pillar of her community, known for her generosity, her big heart, and her unshakable faith. She was the heart of our family, the one who held us all together. It didn't matter what was going on, she was always there for us. She made every holiday, every birthday, every moment special. She was my strength. Losing her, it doesn't feel real. Stephanie was the glue that held her family together, always there for her children, grandchildren, and friends. Her laughter was a familiar sound, her presence a comfort. She didn't just play the role of a mother and grandmother, she embodied it with grace and love. Her home was a place of refuge, a space where family could always find support and compassion. In the face of this devastating loss, Stephanie's family is united in their grief, but they are also united in their determination to seek justice. Stephanie's legacy, her love, her compassion, and the immeasurable impact she had on those who knew her, will never be forgotten. And as they demand answers, one thing is clear. This family will never stop fighting for the truth, and for the woman they lost too soon. To gain insight into what might have gone wrong, we spoke with prison consultant Justin Papari, a professional with extensive experience working with inmates. With years spent advising correctional facilities and studying the behavior of prisoners, he was able to offer a deeper understanding of the psychological dynamics at play, especially when it comes to life sentences, particularly for those who will never be released. Justin Papari. Inmates serving life sentences without the possibility of parole are in a very unique psychological position. These individuals are not just serving time. They are, in a sense, sentenced to a life without hope. Papari suggests that inmates, especially those like Brinsen, who have already demonstrated their capacity for cold-blooded violence, may view their relationships with outsiders as opportunities to manipulate. The psychological games that unfold in these situations are subtle and insidious, and the victim, like Stephanie, may not even realize the full extent of the psychological control at play. Brinsen's violent history, combined with his life sentence, likely created an environment where manipulation could thrive. What is clear is that in a case like this, trust becomes a weapon. Brinson, with his history of violence, may have created a psychological environment where he manipulated Stephanie into believing that their relationship was genuine, when in reality, it may have been a way to maintain control over her, perhaps even using her presence during a conjugal visit as a means to exert power in a more intimate way. And, tragically, this manipulation may have culminated in her death. While it's impossible to fully know the true nature of the dynamic between Brinsen and Stephanie, and as the investigation into Stephanie's death continues, these complex psychological factors will undoubtedly play a crucial role in understanding what went wrong that night, and whether this was a tragic accident or the culmination of a darker, more calculated plan. As this tragic case unfolds, there are more questions to be answered about the policies that govern family visits in California prisons. The circumstances surrounding Stephanie Dowell's death have prompted an intense reassessment of the very systems meant to keep visitors safe while maintaining prisoner rehabilitation. Will this incident lead to a reevaluation of these policies? Will prisons across the state revise their security protocols, especially when it comes to violent offenders? Legal experts believe this case could set a significant precedent for how inmates with violent histories, like David Brinson, are treated when it comes to family privileges. Currently, inmates who serve life sentences without the possibility of parole are not automatically barred from conjugal visits. However, the tragic events surrounding Stephanie's death could lead to calls for a fundamental shift in how these policies are approached. The case highlights a deep flaw in the system, specifically regarding the safety of visitors. There's been ongoing debate about whether inmates who have committed heinous crimes should be granted conjugal visits at all, particularly those serving life sentences. If you have someone like Brinson, who's already shown his capacity for extreme violence, the risk becomes too great. This case could push for stricter criteria, such as a ban on conjugal visits for inmates with violent histories. As the investigation into Stephanie's death continues, the question of whether Brinson will face further charges remains unanswered. But one thing is certain: if convicted of this crime, it would mean an even longer sentence for the man already serving multiple life terms. His violent past will undoubtedly play a central role in how this case unfolds, and the consequences for Brinson, no matter the outcome, will be severe. For now, Stephanie's family and the community are left to grapple with the devastating loss. Their grief is compounded by the unanswered questions. Was this a carefully planned act of violence, or a tragic moment that spiraled out of control? And as the authorities continue to investigate, one truth remains clear: the case is far from over, and its implications reach beyond the walls of Mule Creek State Prison. This case is more than just about one man's violent history. It raises important questions about prison policies, about rehabilitation, and about the real human costs of violent crime. What is the balance between allowing for redemption and ensuring the safety of everyone involved? How much trust can we place in a system that, in this instance, failed Stephanie Dowell's? Stephanie's death is not just a statistic. It is a human tragedy. A mother, a grandmother, a wife, taken too soon. And while the investigation continues, the pain for those who loved her will never fade. This tragedy forces us to ask difficult questions. How could someone with a violent past be allowed the privilege of family visits? What safeguards are in place to protect the vulnerable from those capable of extreme violence? Can rehabilitation truly occur in an environment where trust can be easily manipulated? In the end, This story is a stark reminder of how fragile justice can be, how policies meant to support rehabilitation, policies that are designed to allow inmates to reconnect with their families, can sometimes lead to disastrous consequences. The tragic loss of Stephanie Dowles challenges the very foundation of trust that the public places in the correctional system. This tragedy speaks to the delicate balance between offering second chances and ensuring the safety of those on the other side of the bars. And, for Stephanie's family, the pain of loss will never be forgotten. As they continue to grieve, they are left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives, seeking justice and, above all, understanding. This is a case that will leave a lasting impact, not just on those directly involved, but on the broader conversation about the safety of families, the integrity of prison policies, and the very concept of justice in a complex and often imperfect system.